Good morning. Welcome to the Light on Suitability podcast. I'm Elizabeth Comeau, your host, along with guest host Joseph Haytas. We're both attorneys representing eligible parolees at their suitability hearings. Michele Garfinkle couldn't be with us today, and Daryl and Sean could not be with us today. Joe and I wanted to talk about, and this was an idea that he had, which is great, and that is typical reasons why our clients get denied parole, number one. And number two, when you do get denied, what is the length of denial and why? What is typically involved in a 3-year, 5-year, 7-year, 10-year? I've rarely seen a 15-year. I don't think I've ever had a 15-year. I've had a couple of 10s, not that many. You have to really, really screw up to get a 10. And the other thing is, it's just, this topic is the opposite of why someone would get granted parole. And typically, very easily, someone gets granted parole when they're discipline free, when they've internalized their programming, when they have sufficient programming, they really understand who they were before coming to prison, addressed all of those issues, and able to articulate what was going on, in addition to explaining who they are now and how it's different and how they'll react differently in the future. But that can be kind of a subtle difference, and for some clients don't really understand the difference. And the denial links in particular, like when is someone sort of on the fence between a grant and a denial? What is that? Typically a grant versus a 3-year denial. What I've seen lately is 100% recent serious write-ups is getting you into the 5-year territory. And then beyond that, if you've got recent write-ups and a lack of programming, a lack of effort, a lack of insight, a negative attitude, lack of remorse, I mean, you're really pushing yourself into a 7 and a 10-year category. What I've seen on a 10 is just no effort. And I'm talking no effort, not only no effort, but an unwillingness to make any effort. And that will push you into a 10. It's very rare to get a 15. I don't know. I think you have to really, really, really be aggravated in those items, meaning the recency of the write-up. And by recency, I'm talking within 6 months of your hearing, within 3 months of your hearing, you're really screwing up. That's going to put you in the 5-year territory right there. And then what's going to move you? What could move you down from there? What could you move you up from there? Meaning what could hurt you more? And that is just coming in without programming. So the other topic that this might lead to, maybe on a different day, is what should you do? You know, you are facing a lengthy denial. You either plan on getting it together, or you're not sure if you can get it together, meaning our clients, speaking to their family members today mostly, is what should you do? Should you waive, knowing that the next year you're probably still not going to be granted parole because you don't have that sufficient distance? Should you just go in and take the denial length and work backward? There's a couple of different strategies on that. It just really depends. And that can be a kind of a flow charty type of thing. But I've just given that very broad overview of typical reasons for denial and typical reasons for the length of denial. But maybe Joe can help me get into more of the nitty gritty, more of explaining on the deeper level what it is about those disciplines that the commissioners are not willing to take a chance on you on parole if you do have that recent discipline, maybe types of disciplines as well. Anything else you want to cover, Joe, please feel free.
Sure. And you know what, you said a lot there, and I was thinking, unfortunately, I've had about 3 that I can remember 15-year denials. It's, first of all, it's really sad when that happens. But it's really the fault of the inmates, because when you have recent write-ups, you haven't done any programming at all, and then you come in there with a sense of entitlement, expecting things after you've done something very terrible, and it results in a 15-year denial. It's almost like, like I remember one time on one of those 15-year denials, the inmate was asked a question by the commissioner, and the inmate said something to the effect of, well, yeah, didn't you look at my file? You mean you don't know that? So it's like, come on, At any rate, I know our listeners are probably more interested in the other end of the spectrum, getting the difference between a 3-year denial and a grant of parole. And usually when people get a 3-year denial, they're close because the majority of those come back in 18 months for another hearing, and they're close, and the commissioners want them to kind of tighten up a few things, maybe regarding programming, to have a little bit more before they feel confident in granting the individual parole. So I always tell them, okay, why were you denied at the last hearing? Okay, you better directly address those issues, whether it's a better relapse prevention plan, more programming in this area or that area. You come from a background of domestic violence and you haven't done any domestic violence, so we want you to get domestic violence, because that's one of the 2 reasons why people are come back after they're granted parole, either domestic violence or substances. Those seem to be like the two big areas. So you not only want to program in there, but obviously show how you've internalized the concepts, and they should be right there in your relapse prevention plan. So yeah, then a 5-year denial, well, that's like you go in and you have a good attitude, but you haven't really done hardly anything at all. And, maybe you've been discipline free for like 2 years or something. But they want that 5-year discipline free, even though it's not the law, but obviously it's something that's implied, that's there. They want that, what they call the buzzword of the prolonged period of positive programming, and that includes discipline free time and addressing the causative factors of your crime, all those issues you had back when you committed the crime. What some inmates don't get is they say, oh, well, you know what, I've been down 20 years and I've been good and I do this and that. But that's not how the ground rules that are set. You got to follow the ground rules, not your own rules. So, and then I just thought of a 10-year denial I had not too long ago. And this guy had a problem with authority back at the time of the crime. And he still had a problem with authority at the hearing. He asked the deputy commissioner, or told him, he goes, well, by those questions, you're treating me like a POS, if you know what that means. So I called a timeout. I talked to him, and we had the hearing in absentia from that point forward. And I said, you know what,
Right.
you're just hurting yourself, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And he ended up getting a 10-year denial.
Right. Just basically being very rude to the commissioners, or being beyond rude.
Yes.
Beyond rude, acting like a criminal in front of the commissioners will be a definite sinking your boat 10-year denial for sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to just add to that, the clean time, the 5-year not being the rule. Actually, Jennifer Schaefer recently gave a presentation for Life Support Alliance where she presented her PowerPoint of the structured decision-making framework factors. And in her handout, it says 2 to 5 years clean is a consideration. And if you don't have it, you're going to be put into the aggravating factor and not the mitigating factor So 2 to 5 years clean. And then you have to think, well, what's 2 to 5 years clean? Another point that Joe brought up, which is really good, is this notion like, I've already done so much time, I've already done the 20 years to life, they should let me out, but it's 20 years to life. And we've talked about this on previous occasions, but it's not 20 years and then you get granted parole in the face of a recent write-up, and those recent write-ups are 2 to 5 years. So we're looking at, in general, 5 years clean time from, say, an aggressive, violent type write-up versus maybe 2 years clean on a basic disobeying an order.
Out of bounds.
Out of bounds can be tricky. So usually you'll get an admin thing, but yeah, anything disobeying an order, the officer said, go back to your cell, get off the phone or something, your phone time's up and you didn't agree, and then you don't go back pronto, that can be a tricky 2-year clean time issue. And without the 2 years, then you get the 3-year denial, so something that can really play into, like, if you have a recent fight, say within 3 years, they made and you've got a lot of other things, but of course you haven't internalized your anger management programs, your alternatives to violence programs, or whatever, because you're still getting into conflicts with other inmates. Notwithstanding, sometimes you just get ambushed because guys are trying to get out of the whatever situation they're in, and you happen to be their target. But they're going to look at that in terms of, okay, you've got 3 years clean. That's the 3 versus you just got that fight. Now you're looking into 5-year territory and beyond. And so that can really play into the denial links as well. So you've got a cell phone, it's aberrant behavior. You're looking more like a 3-year denial. You really did grab the phone, you used it for a month because a family member was sick or whatever, versus phone after phone after phone, gang activities involved, this and this and this. That repeated misconduct will put you into the 5-year territory, and then the 7-year, then going from 5 to 7 on that situation is they're going to look at, well, are you trying and you're struggling with your addictions to your criminal thinking and sort of thing. If you've got a good attitude, like Joe was saying, polite with the panel, approaching it with a positive way of thinking, come remorseful, have a bit of insight, you just sort of just keep screwing up because sometimes it's difficult. You're on a level 4 yard. You really are trying to do good, but you're just surrounded by negative every single day. So it can be trickier. But recognizing to the panel, admitting to the panel, well, I put myself in this situation. I'm in level 4 because of the pattern that I set before all of that. Now you just have to try and get out of that pattern. As some commissioners will say, control the controllable and that sort of thing. So you can kind of keep yourself to a 5. Sometimes if you're really likable and it's all you're doing is relapsing, sometimes you can even squeeze a 3, but you may still run into the issues with these commissioners that, depending on your type of crime, your type of victim, they're concerned about granting parole to someone where the governor is going to refer you automatically because of the nature of the crime or the victim. So multiple victims, females, children, whatever's involved.
Right, or an extremely callous or cold murder or something.
Extremely serial killing or whatever. You're going to get referred or reversed. And so these commissioners they're wanting some extra stuff. I mean, you really have to have a super solid presentation. So are they going to grant you parole with only 2 years clean on a recent relapse if that's related to your life crime? They can't. They know the governor's going to refer it, and then it's not going to hold up. The rest of the panel's probably not going to vote. The majorities, you're not going to get a majority vote to uphold that. You're going to be back. And so they want to really make sure that they have everything super tight before they grant parole to a problem. Let's call it a problem case for whatever reason. Like I said, victim or nature of the crime.
Mm-hmm.
And then, finally, a couple other things is, you know, I've already done the time, the entitlement issue that Joe brought up is excellent. I mean, we see it all the time, but you know, it was only a non-violent, it was only a burglary. I said, well, you know, people don't want you going into their homes, and they, especially if you're a three striker, you have a pattern of coming into prison, going out of prison, coming back to prison, going out of prison. And so it's really not about, I've done 25 years on crimes I already paid my time for. There's a lot more to it than that, but ultimately the panel isn't faced with that criteria. They're not faced with the decision, can we grant parole just because he's done 25 years? It can't. They have to look at all these other criteria, and that's not even the criteria. A lengthy sentence is not a criteria to grant parole. Sometimes it is in an elderly parole situation, but in general, they have to use the Title 15 factors and the structured decision-making framework to make decisions. So if they make a decision, oh, we just feel bad for the guy, he thinks he's entitled to a grant of parole, so that's what we're going to do. That's not realistic at all. And
No,
so going forward, and then anyway, Joe brought up really great points. And I'm just going to turn it back to him for any last minute thoughts, and we'll wrap it up for this week. And I do appreciate you joining me, Joe, really a lot
of
since I
course.
did.
Yeah. And or you throwing it back to me to any follow up to what you said?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. You know, you mentioned three strikers, and I've heard so many commissioners say that you're not here because of one crime, you're here because of a lifetime of crime. And I had a hearing a couple of weeks ago where the third strike was for some, you know, for a heroin addict stealing a weed whacker out of a garage. And the commissioner gave the inmate great, if you want to call it, great deference for that. And granted him parole. However, the deputy commissioner said no, so they had a tie, they had a split vote, which doesn't happen very often. But unfortunately, this guy had a write up like last September, and the commissioner still wanted to grant him parole. And so it went to an en banc, and they denied parole for 3 years. So, and I saw that coming. I don't know, you know, the commissioner seemed to come from a point of view of compassion, and he was rationalizing the fact that you know he came to prison for stealing a weed whacker, but I guess the en banc panel did not see it that way, which is generally the thing. I know other commissioners he would have been given at least a 3-year denial right then and there because of the recent write up in about the last 6 months.
Right. But the fact of the matter is, you got to the weed whacker, the 25 years for the weed whacker, because you have two other crimes that are very serious or violent in general. So either you're always going into people's homes, which is a very dangerous situation, either for yourself or the homeowner. The homeowner gets scared, you know, they have a right to possess and defend themselves inside their home under
Yes.
many circumstances. So that's an issue. They don't want that happening again. When you're
Mm-hmm.
under the influence of drugs, you don't make good decisions. And basically, people don't want their stuff stolen. And people tend to escalate, and addicts in general tend to escalate their behavior. As we know, it's never just one drink, it's never just the one weed whacker, it's always more and more and more. And so that's what the en banc panel was probably thinking about. And I get it, some of these commissioners want to just focus on the one issue, but if you're just returning back to crime, I don't think that looks good for the commissioners in general, and they're going to take a lot of flack from the public
Mm-hmm.
about that. So not that that's not why they grant or deny paroles, they're worried about flack, but they are worried about public safety, and public safety includes, I don't want my stuff stolen. As Mr. Joe and Jill Public, they don't want that. And so if you're releasing somebody somebody imprudently, improvidently, I think is the word they use. So I think it's a
Oh,
really
yeah,
great
yeah.
example, Joe, on that and the entitlement behind that attitude. And an attitude, well, it was just a weed whacker to get some heroin, is again, it really is a sense of entitlement, like, what's the big deal? And that means, to me, when I hear that, I'm thinking, well, you lack remorse. So you need to
Mm,
work on that. You lack humility. You're still being selfish. You're still thinking in terms of poor me. It's no big deal. There's just a lot of things involved in that attitude. So
yes.
I think it's a huge topic, just to go on about. But if you have anything else, Joe, otherwise we'll wrap it up.
I really don't have anything else. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you stepping in today and coming on board again. I appreciate your input. And thank you to all of our listeners. And we'll see you next week.